Welcome to Stellar HFY Stories. Please subscribe to my channel. Your one-click means the world to me. Folded hands. In the vast, silent theater of the cosmos, where stars burn like ancient campfires against the velvet dark, diplomacy is often just a polite word for waiting to see who shoots first. It is a lesson most learn the hard way, but Commander Ethan Cross had always possessed a unique relationship with danger. His academy instructors, in a desperate attempt to be kind, called it selective awareness of social protocols. In reality, Ethan simply lacked the biological imperative that told a sane man when to run. It was a trait that had allowed him to negotiate with crystalline energy beings without blinking, but it was about to be tested on a stage that could shatter the fragile peace of the galaxy. Haven's Gate Station served as the neutral ground between three major star empires, a humming hive of 50 different species conducting business in a state of controlled chaos. Ethan, a human attaché amidst beings whose biology defied physics, was reviewing trade agreements when the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't a gradual change. It was the sudden, violent silence of a decompression alarm. Conversations died in midair. The ambient lighting seemed to recoil. The chaotic crowd of the main concourse parted with the terrified precision of a school of fish fleeing a shark. Then she entered. Empress Kithravex of the Andorian Empire, the Crimson Scourge. In stories, we often hear of beauty that stops the heart, but Kithravex possessed the kind of presence that stopped time itself. She moved like a force of nature draped in imperial regalia, her silver hair catching light that didn't exist, her cape flowing with a gravity all its own. But it was her eyes, crimson as fresh blood and twice as lethal, that commanded absolute submission. She scanned the crowd with the predatory boredom of a god walking among mortals. Beside her, seasoned generals looked like nervous children. The terrifying reputation of the Andorian Empire, spanning 40 conquered star systems, walked in her shadow. Ethan, whose xenobiological curiosity often overrode his survival instinct, didn't bow. He stared. He watched her with the frank fascination of a man witnessing a supernova up close. The universe, perceiving a breach in protocol, seemed to hold its breath. Kithravex froze. Her crimson gaze locked onto Ethan S. with the precision of a targeting laser. She marched toward him, the crowd dissolving from her path until only the suicidal human remained. "You dare look at me?" she demanded. Her voice was the sound of tectonic plates grinding together, heavy, inevitable, and dangerous. Ethan smiled, a gesture so reckless it should have been classified as a weapon. "Only because you're beautiful." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a starship. It was the silence of a paradigm shifting. The Empress, the terror of the Outer Rim, blinked. Her perfect, lethal composure wavered, cracking under the weight of a compliment she had never processed. "Beautiful," she repeated, the word tasting alien on her tongue. "Strikingly so," Ethan confirmed, doubling down on his diplomatic heresy. "Actually, I hope that's not inappropriate. Human protocols encourage the acknowledgement of aesthetic appreciation." "No one," she said slowly, looking at him as if he were a mathematical impossibility, "calls me beautiful. They call me the Crimson Scourge, the Iron Empress." "Impressive titles," Ethan agreed, "but they don't really capture the aesthetic component, do they?" Before this surreal courtship could continue, reality crashed back in. A military aide, decorated with enough medals to anchor a small fleet, rushed forward in a panic. "Your Imperial Majesty, priority communication. The Zephyrian Republic has launched simultaneous attacks on 3 border worlds. Kepler, Arcturus, New Harmony, all hit." The woman vanished, the warlord emerged. Kithravex's eyes hardened into crystallized fire. "They attack while I am engaged in diplomacy," she hissed, her voice dropping to a terrifying chill. "General Vore, prepare the fleet." "Your Majesty," Ethan interjected, stepping onto the thin ice of unsolicited advice. "Military retaliation might be exactly what they want." The entire Andorian entourage turned to glare, hands drifting to weapons, but Kithravex paused. "Explain." "It's a trap," Ethan said, his mind shifting into the strategic analytics that made him brilliant. Simultaneous attacks on infrastructure. They aren't trying to conquer, they're trying to provoke. They want the Crimson Scourge to unleash hell so they can paint you as the aggressor. If you respond with force, you play their game. "My reputation requires defense," she countered coldly. "Then defend it with intelligence," Ethan challenged. "Make them fear your mind more than your firepower." It was a moment that turned the tide of history. "Very well, human," she decided, her curiosity piqued. "You will accompany us aboard the Asterisk Starfare Dominion. But if your advice fails, you will wish I had executed you for the compliment." Aboard the flagship, a vessel capable of glassing planets, an unlikely partnership bloomed. Ethan and Kithravex worked in the war room, not as conqueror and captive, but as conductors of a grand symphony. They devised a plan of psychological warfare, using stealth technology to bypass the enemy blockade and restore communications via quantum networks, rendering the Zephyrian siege irrelevant without firing a single shot. It was elegant. It was precise. "It is artistry," Ethan murmured, watching her work. "No one has ever called my strategy artistic," Kithravex noted, a softness entering her crimson gaze. "No one ever called you beautiful either," Ethan reminded her. But the symphony was interrupted by a discordant note. The intelligence officer reported a breach. Imperial ships were feeding data to the enemy. The betrayal was internal. The realization hit the bridge like a physical blow. The traitor was Admiral Drax, Kithravex's own mentor, the man who had taught her the very strategies she was now evolving beyond. "He knows our standard protocols," General Vore despaired. "He expects the heavy hand of the Empire." "Exactly," Ethan said, his eyes lighting up. "He expects the old you. He doesn't know the new strategy." They set the trap. Admiral Drax was invited aboard for emergency consultation. He arrived with the confident swagger of a man who believes he is writing the ending of the story. He urged immediate, overwhelming retaliation, the very move that would have doomed them. The Empire must show strength. Drax argued, unaware the noose was already tight. "Commander Cross has offered a different perspective," Kithravex said calmly. She activated the main display. The screen didn't show war. It showed humiliation. The Zephyrian fleets were revealed to be guarding nothing, their blockade rendered useless by the stealth network. The Imperial fleet hadn't engaged, yet they had won a total strategic victory. "Impossible," Drax stammered, his face draining of color. "They were prepared for standard protocols." "But we didn't use standard protocols," Kithravex said, stepping closer, her presence towering over her fallen mentor. "We used innovation. We used collaboration." As security dragged the disgraced admiral away, Kithravex turned to Ethan. The bridge was silent, save for the hum of a victorious ship. "Commander Cross," she said, her voice carrying a new kind of warmth. "I would like to offer you a permanent position as my strategic advisor." "I would be honored," Ethan replied. "And," she added, her crimson eyes locking with his, stripped of their anger, "you were the first person to see me as something other than a weapon. I find myself curious what other observations you might make if you stayed. Reshape the future. Comment your idea, hit subscribe." 6 months later, the Andorian Empire was unrecognizable. It was no longer a blunt instrument of conquest, but a scalpel of sophisticated diplomacy, led by an empress and her human liaison who had learned that true power isn't about how much you can destroy, but how clearly you can see. They proved that even the most terrifying rulers in the galaxy are just waiting for someone brave enough to look them in the eye and tell them the truth. The Crimson Scourge had become something far more dangerous, a leader who was loved, respected, and occasionally reminded that she was beautiful.